Please, Secretary.
Sure. Good afternoon, Mr. President. So I'm in San Diego reviewing our border security and immigration efforts. Is it working?
Yes.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And as you've described, sir, in fact, this is a humanitarian security crisis. We're doing our best out here. I always want to take an opportunity to thank the great men and women of the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection, but the system itself is simply overwhelmed. This is my around 17th trip to the border in the last year, and I can tell you, unfortunately, the crisis is getting worse. Our immigration system is simply badly broken. So let me start by saying, from a DH perspective, Mr. President, now more than ever, we need the wall. Today I'm going to talk quickly about how bad the crisis has gotten, but to fix it, we need what our frontline operators are demanding, which is a barrier that will keep illegal aliens, drugs, criminals, terrorists, and other threats from entering our country. Walls work, as you said. It's not a political issue, it's an operational one. We've seen the successes of walls in El Paso, in Yuma, in San Diego, and in El Centro sector. Under your leadership, we're building the first new wall in over a decade, but we need more. We need new sections of wall at our top illegal entry points, something that Congress unfortunately prohibited us from doing last year in our appropriations. And we also need to continue to replace the old, outdated, and ineffective wall sections that you referenced. We need to replace them with wall that has been identified for operational purposes by the professional men and women of CDP, not by uninformed political restrictions that have been put on our appropriations. As you know, the southern border remains the principal entry point for both cocaine and methamphetamine entering the United States, and seizures in both narcotics are spiking. We've also seen, unfortunately, an increase in fentanyl coming across the southern border, which kills about 72,000 Americans every year. The southern border is also the primary entry point for criminals and gang members. Just last year, we apprehended more than 17,000 criminals and 1,000 gang members along the southern border. We are also concerned about potential terrorists as well. As you know, in 2018 alone, we apprehended 3,000 special interest aliens coming into our country along the southern border. These are aliens that have travel patterns or other characteristics of concern to the intelligence community. Mr. President, we need a strong border wall system to keep these threats and others out of the U.S., and I strongly support your continued efforts to obtain the needed resources from Congress. And if I could, let me just give you a little bit more about the crisis. We also need to address poorly written and outdated laws. Simply put, our laws allow illegal aliens into the country and allows them to stay. This must change. Here's the reality of the crisis we're facing. On average, as you said, we see about 2,000 people a day try to illegally enter our country at the southern border. We will never be able to send the majority of them back home unless and until Congress acts to close the loopholes these people are exploiting to stay in the country. To break it down, there are three categories of illegal aliens arriving at our borders: single adults, family units, and unaccompanied children. In the past, single adults have been the vast majority of illegal aliens. They're still the easiest for us to handle. We're able to detain and deport them quickly. Under your administration, Mr. President, we've dramatically ramped up prosecutions of these illegal border crossers with help from the Department of Justice, and we will continue to do so. But the demographics are changing, and the vast majority of the people that we see now are family units and unaccompanied children. They now make up about 2/3 of those arriving at our borders. Because of poorly written laws and activist court decisions, it's virtually impossible to send them home. We're only allowed, as you know, to hold families for 21 days. That's it. Then we have to let them go under the law. Most of them then disappear into the United States. What's worse, in 9 out of every 10 cases, immigration judges find that these families are not even eligible for asylum in the first place and should be deported. But by then, most of them have vanished and escaped the law. Smugglers and traffickers know this. In fact, they know our immigration laws much better than many members of Congress. They are using this as a fast pass to get illegal aliens into America. The result is an explosion in the number of families arriving at our borders and a massive spike in the number of fake families showing up. They know if they pretend they're together, they're likely to get in for good. And quickly, the third category is unaccompanied children. Because of outdated laws, we cannot send kids who show up alone back to their home countries and to their families. They have to be transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services, which places them with sponsors or relatives in America. The result is we see more and more of them every day. Parents are making the unconscionable decision to send children on long, dangerous, and sometimes deadly journeys to our country. We are busting at the seams. HHS is out of capacity, and under the law, CBP must transfer these kids to HHS. These loopholes serve as a giant magnet, which is now resulting in a humanitarian catastrophe. Our system was simply not built to handle this influx of families and children. The human toll is real and shocking. Women are being trafficked and raped. In fact, 1 out of 3 women report they are sexually assaulted on the journey to our borders. Kids are getting abused. They're getting sick, very sick. Many of them are being recycled and used by smugglers to get more people into the United States. And nearly 70% of illegal aliens report being victims of violence along the journey. 70% of those traveling north to our country. Our hearts break for families who have lost children and those who are affected by this violence. We're doing everything we can to ensure rapid medical care when needed. But the men and women at CBP and ICE are doing the best they can with what they have, but they don't have the facilities, the resources, or the legal authorities to keep up with this crisis. Only Congress can give them that. So, sir, the bottom line is, you know, and as you've repeatedly stated, we need Congress to fund and build the wall, give us the resources to deal with this crisis, terminate the Flores Agreement and grant DHS the authority to detain and remove illegal family unit aliens together, and modify the TVPRA so unaccompanied children can be returned home to their families. Right now, our Border Patrol and ICE agents are spending so much of their time dealing with the overflow that we're having to pull them off important national security cases, counter-drug operations, and more. We can't afford to do this any longer. I want to close by thanking the whole of your administration, the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, HHS, CDC, OMB, and others. We are all working together to address this security and humanitarian crisis. Mr. President, you have brought the rule of law back to our border. The men and women of DHS could not be prouder to be given the opportunity to do the jobs that Congress and the American people expect. But we need Congress to act. We cannot continue to do more with less and attempt to secure our country with our hands tied behind our back. Thank you for your leadership and your continued focus as we work with Congress to try to address this.
Thank you very much. It's a really fantastic presentation. I appreciate it. And you have been working very hard. You've been down there. Every time I call, you're at a different location along the border trying to straighten it out. If we had a wall or a barrier that was not penetrable, you wouldn't have people making that journey. And I think we could say that, Kirstjen, if we had the wall, people wouldn't even bother making the journey.